Hello and welcome to our latest Aerotime interview as part of this special week dedicated to women in aviation. My name is Richard Stevenson and I am the Chief Executive of Eratime, and today I'm delighted to be speaking to my good friend Rachel Gardner-Poole, Director at the UK Space Agency. I worked with Rachel for a number of years at the UK Civil Aviation Authority, where we both shared a passion for promoting diversity and inclusion. When I started the very first D&I board at the CAA, Rachel was one of the first people I spoke to. I am really pleased to include Rachel in our activities this week, as she is a great advocate, role model and advisor, and because I know how hard she works to constantly promote and encourage women today and the next generations. In addition to her roles at the UK Space Agency and the UK CAA, Rachel is a qualified pilot and has also worked at the UK Home Office, IBM, and Kinetic. She spent time working on the radar assessment for the Eurofighter Typhoon and working on the evaluation of long-range cruise missiles. She's also passionate about charitable causes and co-founded the Projects Delivering Hope charity, working to deliver aid in South Sudan, including many displaced people living in refugee camps in Uganda. She's also a fundraising volunteer for Mission Aviation Fellowship, which is an international flying charity. Rachel, thank you very much for joining Aerotime today.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So Rachel, you have a long and varied career, much of which has been spent in aviation, which I know you have a passion for. So let's go right back to the start. How did you come to join this industry?
So in terms of my interest in aviation, it really started actually from when I was only about 5 or 6 years old, when I heard about this charity called MAF, which flies aid in developing countries, really to help people. And at that age, I actually told my parents that one day I wanted to be a pilot and wanted to fly for MAF. And it's kind of doing bush flying out in places like Uganda, like South Sudan, something I was really passionate about. But it did seem like an impossible dream. Obviously, flying is expensive, and I've never even been on a plane until I was an adult. So it's kind of one of those in the back of my mind dreams. And I always had this fascination with flight, the ability to fly, and it was just one of those things I really dreamed about doing. In terms of how I got into it, actually, when I left university, I did a degree in maths, and I did actually apply for an organisation which had a big picture of an aircraft saying mathematicians wanted, looked ideal, but I actually ended up being put in the department which was working on submarines. So for the first 5 years, I was focused on submarines, but I kept looking out for other opportunities to work in aviation, and eventually I did get my break, and it was ever since then I've been in aviation.
So the aviation sector has historically been known as a very male-dominated place, and some would argue that that remains the case today. You've got an impressive CV. You've worked in a number of areas that some may think have been, in the past, the exclusive domain of men. So have you ever been worried about being able to make inroads in this aviation sector? And have you ever been worried about the kind of opportunities that you would have to advance through the ranks?
So I wasn't worried actually until I joined the aviation sector, and having worked with submarines, I thought I was kind of prepared for anything. But I think I was really surprised when I started working in aviation, surprised by many of my colleagues' attitudes. I was offered the opportunity to do my private pilot license, and I had a lot of people, a lot of colleagues telling me that women shouldn't fly. I was told that I might faint. I was told it's not suitable for a female to consider flying planes, even privately. And even in the workplace in aviation, I remember being told by people that maybe I shouldn't consider promotion because instead I should focus on getting married and having children, and therefore taking a career break. So there were quite a lot of attitudes, and I think I was just really surprised in my early career just how male dominated it was, and how there didn't even seem to be an enthusiasm or consideration that myself as a female could do the same tasks that the guys could do.
So have you seen other women succeed in the same way that you have? And have you also seen other women actually leave the industry because they didn't feel that they were getting the right kind of opportunities?
So yes, both. So I've definitely seen women succeed, and I did have some, great role models, or one particular role model in my early career. Sadly, I did also see quite a few fellow women who did leave because they were just, I think, fed up with the way they were being treated, and often it was kind of subtle things like, being given a lot of the admin type jobs, even though they were, scientists or mathematicians like myself, very qualified to do, research and development type roles. But instead they were being given, being asked to do photocopying or doing really kind of laborious tasks and not using their brain. And I did often help and try and help women who kind of, challenge this, but some, and certainly had two friends and colleagues back in my kind of first aviation role who actually did leave and went and did something completely different because they didn't want to continue in this environment.
So you mentioned that you did have role models, and you have had role models throughout your career in aviation. How important have those role models been to you, and have you had both male and female role models?
Yeah, so I think they have been really important, and I have definitely had both male and female role models. Again, when I was experiencing some of the challenges, I definitely did have one particular senior female role model who did really help. She provided support, she was an advocate for me, but also many male role models who have stood up or helped me, encouraged me to do things that I thought I may not be able to do, or when it felt as if everything was against me. I've had other people around me who've been able to encourage me, which has been really, really helpful and invaluable.
So in addition to role models, you've also worked with a lot of leaders across the aviation world. What have you encountered from those leaders and from that kind of leadership, and how do you think that's actually helped you progress your career?
So I've had a variety of leaders. I've had leaders who have really discouraged me from taking various roles because I was female. But then I've had fantastic leaders who have really encouraged me, and almost, if I've started to have self-doubt or started to think maybe I shouldn't or couldn't do something, have really encouraged me to go for stuff. And that just makes such a difference, and something I'm really passionate about passing on to other people as well.
So you talk about that experience, and you talk about those leaders, and you talk about wanting to pass that information and those experiences on to other people. And I know that you've done a lot of work to promote diversity, inclusion. You've done a lot of work to try and encourage the next generation, which we'll come to in a minute. But what exactly have you done to try and promote diversity and inclusion in aviation? And what kind of things are you most proud of?
So often things that I'm most proud of is actually when I've ended up, mentoring. I've mentored a lot of females throughout my career. And when, the feedback I get from them, or when I actually see someone, you can see the positive difference, either in a different career that they've chosen, they've made quite positive changes in their life. And that for me is probably the most satisfying thing, is helping other people. There's also been occasions when I have actually really kind of championed someone's case where I thought they were being treated unfairly, either because I just noticed it or observed it, and would step in, or often people would come to me kind of for advice and help, and actually ask me maybe to kind of go along with meetings, or help them prepare for a particular challenging meeting where they were going to challenge behaviours around them. So I think that for me is kind of where I feel like I've added most value.
I mean, I know that you've done a lot of that work, and I know that you've supported a lot of people. But if there are some young women out there who really want to get into aviation, but they don't feel as if they have that kind of role model available to them, what would your advice be to those people?
So I would really encourage them, and I've always said, follow your dreams. It's something I've always said to my nieces and nephew: follow your dreams. Nothing's impossible, and don't ever give up. And look out for those kind of role models. Something that I'm really passionate about is promoting STEM subjects, particularly in schools. Last week I was speaking to 200 14 to 16-year-old girls about my career, and that was only 20 minutes of my time, but I'm very conscious that 20 minutes could have had a massive impact on several of those young girls. So for me, that is time well spent, and it's something I'm so personally passionate about, and would encourage others as well to do the same. Just take 20 minutes, half an hour out of their day once a month could make a massive difference to those young people.
So you talk about STEM subjects and you talk about the importance of STEM subjects, but how important is it that girls today are being encouraged more and more to explore a range of STEM subjects that historically have been the exclusive domain for boys? And do you think enough is being done to do that?
So I think there is definitely a lot more focus on this. I know, it's part of the national curriculum, which I think is brilliant. So there's more. I think you can always do more to encourage the younger generation to consider STEM subjects and consider careers in aviation. I think, many people think of aviation as just being pilots or pilots and engineers, and don't realise that aviation is a massive range of careers, and there's so many different things you could get into. And promoting that and encouraging people, making people realise that from a young age, when their perceptions of the world are being created, is really, really important.
I know that you do a lot of this work. I know a lot of other women in aviation that do a lot of this work. I also know quite a lot of men who are very supportive of this work. But what do you want from men in this industry? How can we help more? Because we're all as passionate about this as you and I both know we are.
So I think men, it's partly how you treat other people, behaviours I think are so important. And in terms of encouraging younger people, you don't have to just be a female to encourage younger girls or boys to consider STEM subjects or careers. I think anyone can do that, provided it's done with the right attitude.
So when you think about something like Women in Aviation Week, what kind of thing do you want to see coming out of this week? What do you want this week to achieve?
For me, Women in Aviation Week is just such a great opportunity because, you can read and hear and listen about so many different inspirational females. And it just shows that the world really is changing to how it was, say, 20, 30 years ago when I started in aviation. I find that really inspiring personally myself, but I also think it's important to encourage other women, to consider careers in aviation, and also young people and girls as well to consider these type of careers.
You talked about how things, have changed. You think that progress has been made, but you said that you can always do more. So do you think that during your time in aviation, do you think enough has changed? And do you think it is still a male-dominated industry?
So I definitely think it's still a male-dominated industry in certainly the kind of more obvious parts of aviation, such as pilots and engineers. I definitely think it's changing. So I think nowadays you're less likely to have someone say directly, for example, that a woman shouldn't fly, because that wouldn't be politically correct. I think the other, I suppose, danger of this is that can mean that attitudes and behaviours about females in aviation can just be suppressed, so they can still be there, but they're not as obvious, which then can be more difficult to challenge. I still look at, when you look at pilots and engineers, they are still vast majority of men, and it's one of those few careers where there hasn't been that much of a percentage increase in terms of the number of females doing those roles.
So here at Eratime, we've been very keen to mark this week and to do everything we can to promote all of the kind of messages that you're talking about and to encourage, that next generation. And one of the things we've done is we've launched a new series, and it's called Behind the Scenes, which gives people that behind the scenes view of the important stories that are going on in aviation at the moment. And the very first one, we teamed up with Josh Carhill from one of the YouTubers on aviation to cover this historic flight that he went on in Afghanistan a couple of weeks ago that had an all-female crew, something that you probably wouldn't expect when you think about Afghanistan. But how does that story make you feel, and do you want to see more stories like that happening?
Yeah, so I did see that story. It was absolutely brilliant. I think it's fantastic. It just shows that the world is changing, which I think is really good news. Definitely would love to see more of it. Sometimes I stop and reflect and think, gosh, it's 2021, this should be normal by now, and it's not. But I think it's great that we're on that journey.
So Richard, if there was one thing, just one more thing that you could change in the aviation industry, so that when you look back on the industry in 10 years time, you see that major thing has changed, what would it be?
So as I mentioned, the aviation industry, it covers a broad range of different skill sets and roles and jobs. But the one thing I would love to see more of is more female pilots. It's one of the few industries where, you know, the percentage of pilots, female pilots, is still less than 10% across the world. And it would be great if you could board a plane, go on holiday, hear the captain speaking, hear a female voice, and that no one bats an eyelid, no one sees that as a surprise.
So you're actually a qualified pilot yourself, and you've done all sorts of things in aviation. Any plans to go back to that, to be one of those women pilots in the future?
The dream that I still haven't quite achieved is I'd still love to fly planes in Africa, but we'll have to wait and see on that one.
So Rachel, one of the things we're doing at Eratime this week is really marking this week of women in aviation. And we're talking to lots of people around the world about their contribution to the work that we're doing and to promoting diversity and inclusion in aviation. One of the really important things we want to do is to mark this occasion by launching the very first Eratime Aviation Achievement Awards. And the very first nominations for these awards have all been women. And we are honoured and delighted to be presenting these awards this week. And I'm very happy to tell you that the Eratime Global Executive Committee has decided to present you with one of these awards.
Oh, wow.
So, Rachel, you are one of the first recipients of the Eratime Aviation Achievement Awards, and I will read you the citation. It says, presented to Rachel Gardner-Poole, Director of Organisational Design and Development, UK Space Agency, in recognition of her dedication and commitment to promoting diversity and inclusion across aviation and beyond, for her encouragement and support of the next generation of women to pursue STEM subjects and to join the aviation sector, for her passion for charity and voluntary work. The Eratime Global Executive Committee recognises the positive influence of these efforts and the significance of the impact on the aviation industry and its people, both today and into the future.
Oh, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that. If only we were there in person.
Well,
thank you.
One day we will be there in person, and we'll be able to hand it over, especially and celebrate this too. Rachel, thank you for joining Eratime today to talk about your work and your thoughts about how we can further develop inclusiveness in aviation. I know that we all want to see the aviation sector make further strides to become an ever more diverse and inclusive industry, and I know that you will continue to make a difference. And congratulations again on your award. That brings us to the end of this Eratime interview. Please do stay tuned for more articles and interviews this week, recognising and celebrating the contribution and success of women in our sector. I hope you enjoy it all. My name is Richard Stevenson, and you've been watching Eratime. Goodbye.